Morning everybody, this is our spring oats, really coming on, beginning to turn now. Quite pleased, very level crop, just a little bit worried about the variable ripening. I've had a look in sort of inside the canopy, worrying that it was sort of secondary growth. But actually, it's the same throughout. So I just think it's individual plants rather than secondary growth. It continues to rain here. We haven't had a chance to go combining this week. So I'm in another field of oats, which I'll come to in a minute. But I just wanted to say this week I was on a call. I'm part of a LEAF project. Nature-based solutions to climate change, and they were talking about how to communicate the lessons learned from the project. And one of the observations I had is that I spend a lot of time reading about farming between the wars, because in my opinion that was the closest thing to regenerative practices. And we have an opportunity, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, is to review what decisions they'd come to and start from there and progress forward. But I'd like to challenge myself this morning on that assumption. Is that really true? How come? I don't want to jettison 90 years of agricultural evolution. Why have I chosen that particular period? The point I'm trying to make is that agricultural thinking evolves, and you start from your current position, and then it tends to be an incremental improvement. But what happens if an assumption you've made early on in the process turns out to be wrong, and then it sends you off on a completely different path? So that's really what the point that I want to start on, is that in that period tractors were just coming around. They were having to cultivate because they didn't have direct drills. They couldn't penetrate straight into unmoved soil. Yes, they used to grow cover crops, but it tended to be cover crops that were then cultivated in, a bit like a standard organic system really. So that premise that you have to cultivate in order to establish a crop is no longer relevant, because it's such an imperative and such a core principle of their decision making. Then it sends us off in a completely different direction. And why am I whittering on about this? Well, it comes back to this field of oats. So these oats are after a 2-year fallow, effectively. They were doing some work on the pylons, and so we took this field out of production. If you look at it compared to those oats that I was in previously, they are very short, up to my knee. Establishment method was just the same, and we're less than, I suppose, the other field of oats is just the other side of those trees. So I would say similar soil type. This has been long-term arable prior to the 2 years of fallow. So there could be an argument that we're talking about soil health, that the other field of oats is being ex-grass or having a long grass chunk in its history. It has better organic levels, better soil health, and that's the reason for this field's poor performance. But it could also be about carbon cycling. So John Kempf makes this point: with regenerative agriculture, you're not trying simply to store more carbon in your soil, you're trying to cycle it faster, i.e. you let your cover crop grow, it dies, it feeds the microbes, those microbes feed the next plant, or those microbes die, they then feed the next cash crop. You're always pumping sunlight energy into the system through sunlight and exudates, and the whole system develops a speed, and a spinning flywheel principle goes around faster, lets you draw more out. So if this field has been sitting in fallow and effectively has just grown one annual crop which is rotted down, it's a very slow system. And this also answers a little bit of the question that people pose, well, why, if regenerative is so good, why aren't we simply organic? Well, the principle is that actually we are enhancing natural systems. So in this particular case, if we take the natural fallow, the weeds grow up over the year, they die back, next year's weeds grow up. Whereas the field next door, it's a much faster system. Cover crop grows, gets eaten, destroyed, goes back into the soil, cash crop goes up, grows, dies, goes back, cover crop grows. It's a much faster system, much more active, growing roots in the soil all the time, and the carbon cycles much faster. So this would help to explain why that crop next door looks so great and this one is so stunted in comparison. And then coming back to the principles of farming in the 1930s, they would never have been able to establish a crop like this. They could never have drilled directly into a 2-year fallow. They would have had to probably plough or double plough in order to break it down. So there are big differences between the farming abilities of the past and what we're trying to achieve in the future. It's worth saying that one of the reasons I chose oats is because they are a bit of a pioneer crop and therefore fit quite well in a rotation after a 2-year fallow. And really I'm quite pleased with how clean this crop is, considering the only herbicide it's had has been a spray for thistles, and you can see the occasional cow parsley, and I think that's I don't know, maybe a wild oat over there, but generally it's pretty clean. So let's hope for better weather. Let's hope that we can get back to some combining next week. The weather looks to be improving, and certainly I'm looking forward to finishing off the rape. Wheat is moving on. It would be good to get into some wheat.